Hi everyone, my name is Sharmin Anwar. I'm an attorney with Cobb Legal Aid. I'm also the attorney here in the Law Library, where I offer free 30-minute consultations to qualifying individuals. And today I will be giving a presentation on the basics of legitimation. So a little background about Cobb Legal Aid. Cobb Legal Aid is a nonprofit law firm providing free advice and or assistance to low-income people for many basic civil legal matters, and we do prioritize issues of shelter and safety. The types of cases we handle are family law, housing, education, special ed, and public benefits. We serve income eligible people, and income eligibility is linked to the federal poverty rate, and applicants must live in Cobb or have a Cobb County case. When to call us? You should call us if you are being evicted, if your landlord refuses to make repairs, if you are experiencing domestic violence, if your disabled child's educational needs are not being met, or if your public benefits were terminated. Cobb Legal Aid does intake and screening by phone 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Monday through Thursday. You can call, or you can do an online application for non-urgent issues. And just as a disclaimer, this is a general presentation about Georgia law, and it may or may not directly apply to the facts of your case. So if you are looking for specific legal advice, I advise you to please consult with an attorney. And as I had mentioned, I am the lawyer in the law library. I am there from Monday through Wednesday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., and I provide free 30-minute consultations to qualifying individuals. Today we'll be talking about legitimation and just going to go over the basics of it. So what is legitimation? Well, in Georgia, legitimation allows the biological father to be recognized by law as a legal father when a child is born out of wedlock. So this is a very specific situation where you have two parents who've had a child outside of a marriage, okay? We're not talking about other situations. It's really just when a child is born out of wedlock. And legitimation, well, it functionally allows the father to seek custody of the child, and it recognizes child as the natural heir of the father. So we understand what custody is, but let's break down natural heir of the father. What does that really mean? Well, it means that when the father passes, the child that has been legitimated is considered to be a natural heir, meaning that child can now inherit from their father's estate, so get their belongings. They would be considered an heir in that situation. If the child was not legitimated, then they would not be considered a natural heir of the father. So why is legitimation even important? Well, if parents were never married, then at least initially, only the mother has sole physical and legal custody of the child. So that means the father has no rights to the child, only the mother has rights to the child. So legitimation is that process that allows the father to then say, okay, I do have rights to this child. Otherwise, the mom is the only one who has sole physical and legal custody of the child. I do want to take a moment to make a distinction between legitimation and paternity, because they are talked about hand in hand. And under Georgia law, paternity establishes the biological condition of being a father, but it does not establish the legal relationship of the father and child. So really, paternity is about who is the biological father. Legitimation is about having legal rights to that child. And I think it's best to kind of look at it as two different branches. You have paternity, and then you have legitimation. You need to establish paternity in order to legitimate the child, but you do not need to establish legitimation in order to establish paternity. So that's why those two things are very important. When paternity is established, child support can be collected from the biological father. It doesn't actually give any rights to the father. So how do you legitimate? You can file a petition for legitimation in custody. This is the most common way to do it. And then there's also marriage subsequent to birth. So for example, if two parents had a child while they were not married, but then later after the child was born decided to get married, that child is then considered to be legitimated by the father because of that subsequent marriage. And I kind of want to take a moment to talk about the petition itself. So the petition for legitimation, you can get a copy of it here in the law library. You can also find it online on the court's website. So the packet's pretty thick, but the petition for legitimation is actually just like a few pages. It's not very complicated. It's pretty straightforward, and we'll talk a little bit about the packet itself. But that's essentially what you would be filing, is this petition for legitimation. Importantly, only the father may file for legitimation. This is something that I come across a lot, where a mother will come and see me and say, I want the father to see the child more. I want the father to take the child on holidays or this or that. How can I kind of have something enforceable? And I'll tell her that in that situation, only the father can initiate the legitimation proceeding. A mother cannot compel or initiate the legitimation proceeding herself. Not even a relative. No one really can force a father to legitimate their child. Now, this is different from paternity. So we were just talking about paternity, which again establishes a biological relationship. But unlike legitimation, the mother can initiate paternity. She, not just the mother, but the child can initiate paternity. A relative who is taking care of that child can initiate paternity, and the Division of Child Services can also initiate paternity. So that's a really big difference too between legitimation and paternity. So where do you file that legitimation petition? Normally it's filed in Superior Court. Sometimes it can be filed in juvenile court if there's already a dependency case, and a dependency case basically is where maybe there's issues about a parent being unfit for the child, and so you would file maybe a legitimation case in juvenile court if there is an already existing dependency case there. The legitimation petition is usually filed in Superior Court, and it's filed in the county of the mother's residence if the mother lives in Georgia. But if the mother lives outside of Georgia, then the father can file it in the county that the father lives in, or the county that the child lives in if the child lives in Georgia. So requirements of the legitimation process. So as I mentioned, there's a packet, and it's a pretty thick packet, and you're really going to be giving the basics of the child, yourself, the mother. You're going to set forth the name, age, sex of the child or children, the name of the mother and the father, and if the father desires to change the name of the child, then you should list that as well. This is, like I said, it's a pretty big packet, but the first few pages are really the petition itself. Sometimes where there's more of an amicable situation where the mother and the father are on the same page and it's kind of a amicable situation, the mother can essentially consent to the legitimation. That's in the packet as well. She can also waive service or acknowledge service, because when you file a petition for legitimation, you would have to serve the mother, and then the mother is given time to answer. But again, if people are on the same terms, on the same page, in that packet is an acknowledgement of service and consent. So you could give that to the mother if that seems to be your situation. So again, you name the mother, if she is alive, you name the mother as a party, and then the mother would be served, and then the opportunity to file an answer and counterclaim. So she has the right to say, what would she maybe put in her answer? It could be maybe that this person is not the father, or that maybe custody shouldn't be given. So she would have the opportunity to be heard. What can you ask for in your petition? So again, legitimation is about establishing a legal relationship between the father and the child, but you can go beyond that, right? So when you're asking the court to acknowledge that you are the father and you have a legal relationship with the child, you can also ask for custody. You can ask for visitation. Child support would be decided in this as well. There's issues of health insurance, who's going to cover health insurance. You could also ask for a birth certificate amendment. So, you could ask that your name maybe be put on the birth certificate, and you can also do a name change. So as you can see, there's lots, and that's partly why the packet is also so thick, is because there's so many different things you can ask for in that legitimation process. Most people are legitimating because they want custody of their child, right? So I have done a presentation on custody, and that goes in more depth. That is available online, but I'll take a few minutes here to talk about custody kind of broadly. When we're talking about custody, we are talking about two different types of custody. There is legal custody and physical custody. Legal custody gives one party the right to have access to a child's medical, school, and other records, and to be involved or at least consulted in making major decisions that affect the child. And the major decisions that usually people are kind of figuring out is education, extracurriculars, religion, and health. And in that, you can decide, who's going to make decisions about the child's health, who's going to make decisions about their education. And this can look a lot of different ways. It's kind of like a contract that the parents come up with, and they say, this is how we will decide on XYZ issue, and this is how we'll decide on a different issue. Of course, you submit this to the court, and the court ultimately has to approve it, but there's a lot of different variations. For example, mom and dad can say, well, when it comes to academics and health, mom will decide. She will have the final, she will just decide it herself, doesn't have to consult dad. But let's say when it comes to like extracurriculars and education, I forget which one was the first one I said, but basically if it's another couple of issues, dad can say, I get to decide, I don't have to consult mom. Or mom and dad could say, we'll consult each other on all the issues and we'll try our best to come up with the best solution. But if we've reached an impasse, then mom gets final say on certain issues and dad gets final say on other issues. So that's legal custody. So physical custody refers to a person who has actual and physical control over a child or children. The child or children usually live in the home of the person who has physical custody. So this really has to do with who is the child with. And that's usually the custody that most people are trying to get resolved, right? Is I want to see my child, or I want them on XYZ date. So that's usually what most people are concerned about. Custody can be sole or joint. So, you could have variations of that. Joint custodians will usually be designated as either primary or secondary custodian. So when it comes to custody, as I'd mentioned, you as parents will try to work out a situation that works well, but obviously the judge will review it and decide what is in the best interest of the child. That is the standard, best interest of the child. And the judge will look at evidence of family violence, child abuse, substance abuse, mental health issues, criminal history of either parent. So these things are relevant, right? If a parent is asking for primary custody, we want to be able to look at the parent's fitness. They'll also look at the ability of each parent to provide the child with food, clothing, medical care, and to meet the educational and other special needs of the child, bonding and emotional ties that exist between the child and each parent, the length of time the child has lived in the current home in a stable and satisfactory environment. So sometimes you'll see a situation where the child is perfectly fine, and now one parent may be trying to change that, and just because someone's asking for a change doesn't mean it'll necessarily be granted, right? If everything is fine and it's stable and it's good for the child, then it may be harder to change the current situation. The judge will also look at parental involvement in the child's educational, social, and extracurricular activities. So sometimes I have people come to me and say, the one parent has been essentially absent and I do everything, and now that other parent is asking for primary custody, I'm so worried what will happen. And I always have to try to explain that there's a lot that goes in. Just because someone's asking the court to change it doesn't mean it actually will be changed. With custody, so anytime there is any kind of issue involving custody of minor children, you're going to have to come up with a parenting plan and child support. So basically the parenting plan will kind of go over who the decision maker will be. Again, as I'd mentioned, legal custody, right? It's going to ask you to put down who's making those decisions about education, healthcare, religion, extracurriculars. Those are the basic 4 that are already kind of included and expected kind of to be decided upon. But of course, if you want to get more specific and add other issues, you can. The parenting plan will also go over who will have the child majority of the time. And this is very detailed, okay? When you look at the parenting plan, it's asking for like who the child will be with on holidays, not just holidays in general, but like on July 4th, for Thanksgiving, for Mother's Day, Father's Day, summer break. And then it even gets very specific as, well, on the weekends, if the child is going to one parent, what is the pickup time? What is the drop-off time? Where is the child being picked up? Where is the child being dropped off? So parenting plans tend to be pretty detailed. And so when you are working on it, it's best to take a look at it, figure it out, have your preferences down, and then work with the other parent to figure out the best solution. It also goes over, as I mentioned, like visitation too, how and when that will take place. So child support will also be decided, and Georgia follows the income shares model. So basically both parents' incomes are looked at, and that's what's evaluated to figure out the best child support amount. Sometimes people get confused and think that if one parent is paying child support, then the one who's receiving it, their income doesn't matter. That's not true. I also did a presentation on child support, and that's also available to view and kind of get more detailed information about. And then something also to make sure you understand is that the parent with primary custody is the one receiving the child support. And the other thing I also kind of wanted to mention, going back to the parenting plan and custody, there is no presumption that the child should live with the mother or father. The decision is ultimately the decision ultimately depends on the best interest of the child. So that's why there's all these factors. Sometimes people think that there's a presumption, and there isn't one. What happens if you've petitioned for legitimation? So I've seen this happen where, maybe mom and dad are together, everything is great. Dad went ahead and legitimated just so that, he's legally acknowledged to be the father. But what happens if now, after legitimation, they didn't decide on custody because everything was fine, they lived together, there was no issues, but then they break up. And so the father legitimated, but they didn't touch on custody. They decided, well, we don't need to decide custody because we live together. Well, you can still figure out custody, and it's basically a petition for custody after legitimation. That is the form, that is the petition you file. So you can still seek custody of your child if you did not seek it in your petition for legitimation. And you follow the same steps as far as where to file. You would file in Superior Court unless there is a pending dependency case in juvenile court. You would file it in the Superior Court in the county where the mother lives. If she lives outside of Georgia, then you would file it in the county where the father lives. So that's a very basic overview of legitimation. I've included some resources because this is, family law. Sometimes we do see some family violence involved when in legitimation processes. So here's some resources available. And then family law issues, here's some more resources for self-help. As I'd mentioned, I am in the Cobb County Law Library here on the 4th floor. I provide free consultations Monday through Wednesday from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. for qualifying individuals. We do a walk-in system. You can certainly try to schedule a time as well, but it's walk-in and you fill out an intake. I take a look at that intake, see if you qualify. If you do qualify, then I'll meet with you, advise you, but do keep in mind this is a consultation. It doesn't mean it's representation. There's also the family law workshop, which actually you would likely be required to do if you do have a family law case. And then there's also the Fulton Family Law Information Center. This is also a resource available. So if you have any questions, you can contact Legal Aid. We do intakes again, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Monday through Thursday. If you have a non-urgent issue and you want to file an application, you can do that online. Thank you so much.